Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome along to the latest in our National Careers Week webinar series. We're delivering a series of webinars to employers throughout National Careers Week, looking at different things around this kind of landscape. So we did a policy session yesterday, looking at the policy changes and levers that will be being explored in the year ahead. And we're looking tomorrow at a really practical guide to modern work experience that's been suffused throughout the webinars this week, but we'll be looking at a bit of a deep dive, and we'll be doing a little bit of that today through the lens of inclusion. My role here at the Careers Hub is operational hub lead for industry and policy. So I lead on all of our industry engagement. So as ever, if there's anything you want to pick up with me directly, you should have my contact details already, but if not, happy to share them and follow up on any themes from today or this week. So let's get into it then. So here at the Central London Careers Hub, we have over 251 education institutions in our network. That is over 130,000 learners that we have access to. So it's a really vast scale. And within that cohort of young people, there are a whole plethora of different needs and different things to be aware of when engaging with them. I'm going to show you some of the stats and sort of some of the national picture and some of the data that we hold here in central London. But I think really the purpose of this session is not to really spend too much time on the stats, but to look at actually what are the practical ways that we can make some small adjustments to the way in which we deliver to groups of young people that are just go quite a long way actually to ensuring that access and that accessibility to what it is that we're trying to get from those engagement sessions or activities. So we will spend a bit of time on the numbers early on, but I really want to get into the practical detail. And we've got a couple of case studies to talk you through as well. Now, within that network of schools, we work with lots of different types of institutions. So we work with specific institutions for hearing impaired learners. We work with institutions who deliver to learners with autism. But we also work with a huge number of mainstream institutions within which there is significant SEND provision going on. So often we've had in the past a kind of sense of, well, can this employer deliver to SEND or not? And the kind of a binary has been put in place there in our education system. And I'm of the opinion that all employers can deliver to learners with additional needs with a bit of extra support and a bit of extra guidance. And maybe some additional resource around that. Actually, that small amount of resource can go a long way. So let's get into it. So just looking at the stats that we see here in central London, we know that learners with additional needs perform academically lower than they should. And that is not a crisis of potential. That is not a lack of potential or a lack of ambition or a lack of ability. This is often the system not being able to keep pace with the needs that they have and not being adaptable enough for the needs that they have to allow them to engage fully in that. So this data that you're seeing here comes from our Future Skills questionnaire from the last academic year. And what we see is that there is a lack of career planning going on with learners who have additional needs. Career readiness is lower than their peers, and their perception of their essential skills is significantly lower than their peers. So there is a lot of work to do in this space, and I think employers play an absolutely key role in this in terms of raising aspiration, unlocking routes into industry through really well thought through interventions early, but really structured and scaffolded engagement throughout the learner's time at their school or college. So they're really ready for that destination, and they've really made them and their parents or carers have made that decision in terms of their next steps from the most informed position possible. So what we see nationally, and this underlines the point I'm making there in terms of this is the attainment 8 gap. And what we see is a sense of compound disadvantage coming in here. So learners who have additional needs, so special educational needs, and learners who are eligible for free school meals typically perform academically weaker in terms of their attainment 8 measures than other pupils in the system. And again, I'll just make that point really clearly. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, just looking at the names on the screen, but this is not a lack of potential or ability. This is often a lack of differentiation in our approaches. I would really encourage colleagues on the call to explore the Impetus report, the Youth Jobs Gap. It's a little bit old now, but I think it makes some really salient points. It's a couple of years old, but they looked in detail at the exploring of that compound disadvantage. So looking at different measures of disadvantage that we might look at. There are new measures coming through, as we mentioned yesterday. The free school meals measure is quite a blunt measure of economic disadvantage, and there is talk that is going to be transitioning to total household income over the coming years. We dug that out of a Treasury report a little while ago, and it gives you a sense of how boring my job is day to day, looking at those kinds of things. But what we see is that when you layer on these aspects of disadvantage, the system really struggles to keep pace. It really struggles to put in those meaningful adaptations to the curriculum. And that is driven a lot by resource. That's driven by a lack of expertise in some cases, a lack of sort of capacity within our schools and colleges. And as we just explored yesterday on the policy look ahead, those things are being targeted in this next wave of policy reform, with additional training for teachers, mandatory additional training for teachers throughout the mainstream system, and the various things which we'll come on to. Because what we're seeing is that this is not a stable thing. Through additional diagnoses, we are seeing learners who have additional needs rise year on year. And this is not to say that that is inherently a problem. This is a challenge for the system to deal with, to ensure that all of those learners have a really fulfilling, enriching time at their school or college that goes beyond just curriculum learning, but actually sets them up for independence and meaningful employment in the future. This is a copy of a slide I showed yesterday, and I know we've got a couple of people who were on the call yesterday, so apologies for a rerun here, but I just wanted to make the point really clearly. I won't spend too much time on it, but these are some of the key reforms that we saw in the schools white paper last year. So that set of national standards is really to try and end this postcode lottery of support. As I've mentioned there, there are pockets of really, really high quality practice that we can all learn from, I think, across the country, but there are also cold spots, and we need to recognize that. And what the government are trying to do through their white paper measures is to reduce that geographic variation in provision through the setting out of national buckets of standards, or packages as they're calling them, with a clear investment into what the baseline package of support should look like in every mainstream school in the country. And there's a clear direction throughout these measures from government that actually mainstream schools should be doing more for learners with additional needs, and the budgets and the measures reflect that. We know that there have been huge pressures on the EHCP system, the Education, Health and Care Plan. This places a statutory duty on the local authority to ensure that those additional needs and the measures to meet them are being met. Anybody who's been working in the system or has just frankly read some of the news coverage of it will recognise it is a highly adversarial system. It's become very difficult. It was never built for this scale of the challenge that we see in our education system, which has led to significant backlogs in almost every local authority area. And left to run as it is, the stat is 8 in 10 councils would be insolvent within the next 5 to 6 years. Now, the government are wiping off 90% of that bill that has accrued. That is £5 billion that they've put towards the forgiveness of that debt. But that is incumbent on the local authorities to publish an inclusion strategy, and individual schools will need to publish their own also. The other big change with EHCPs is around the reviews, transitions, and what they're trying to essentially get to is a stage more closely aligned with this. well, it is this, where EHCPs or nothing is not the norm. That actually there is a tiered approach to the measures, and a young person can move between these tiers throughout their time at school. So that universal offer for all students, this includes things like having an inclusion base in the school for quiet reflection or time out of lessons and so on. This will need to be published in those school inclusion strategies, and this is where the big investment packages of mandatory teacher training and so on is going to be really targeted. If we can improve the aim is if we can improve the universal offer for all students, get our mainstream settings more equipped and more supported to be able to work to those that level of need, then actually it reduces reliance on the specialist education system. But there is a recognition also that the specialist education system plays a really key role in our wider education system, and that's why the government have committed to providing resource for 50,000 more places across the country over the next year or two. So why should business care about all of this? And I think there's a very obvious, clear moral case. If we're going to be engaging with young people in schools, frankly, you are already engaging with learners with additional needs. Some of our mainstream secondary schools across the region, as high as 50% of their learners will have some kind of additional need. So actually, it's already happening already. Is it happening with the quality that we as employers would hope for? Well, what is the case for doing this review and doing this analysis? Well, by engaging with young people with additional needs, if your purpose is about increasing talent pipelines or establishing stronger talent pipelines, then actually a more diverse workforce there's loads of evidence and loads of data to show that that's a really positive thing for a business. People who think in different ways, who can perform different tasks in different ways. Employers who invest in the work experience, accessible work experience, and we saw this through our Equalex pilots, one of which last year, our modern work experience pilot, had a particular focus on SEND, and the outcomes of that were frankly brilliant. Really sort of higher loyalty, lower staff turnover among those employees that they've brought into the business. So that inclusive hiring increases things like team morale and fosters that culture of empathy, innovation, and so on. And also the social value and community impact. It supports the local authority duties. We did a social value presentation on Monday where we were looking in particular at a particular local authority that has a particular focus on care experienced young people, for example. And there will be pretty much every local authority will have SEND quite high on their list of priorities. So it makes total sense for local alignment too. So again, this is a bit of a rerun from yesterday, so apologies if you've seen this before, but very briefly, this is our Equalex model for modern work experience. The traditional block placement in year 10, we're slowly moving away from, or at least enhancing that offer with a blended, progressive programme of workplace experiences, starting much earlier, shaping aspiration, shaping sectoral interest early, and then moving through into a much deeper, more meaningful engagement as time goes on. And all of this is underpinned by the learning outcomes. And we'll look in detail at some of how some of these outcomes can be achieved, even with some quite reasonable adjustments made. So there are 4 principles I want to present to you today around inclusive outreach, and maybe this is something to reflect on in terms of your own outreach that you've done previously or are planning to do later this academic year. The first is around accessibility, and this is often the simplest one. This is often the one where you know the easiest reasonable adjustments can be made. So it's basically using plain language, plain English, okay, avoiding the corporate jargon. And frankly, a lot of these things are just good practice anyway for working with young people. Breaking down tasks into simple steps, providing those examples and models so learners can really visualize what it is they're being asked to do. really important that we build in some quiet time and that reflection time to allow learners to process and deepen the learning that they're gaining from the experience with yourselves. And then ensuring the materials meet those accessibility standards. Now, what I would say with all of this is every careers leader and every SEN coordinator in a school does this stuff day in, day out. So if you're in doubt at all, you've got an absolutely clear partner to be able to work with through a partnership approach with the particular school or college. All of these adjustments can be made very easily based on your or existing models. The second is representation. I think this one is maybe slightly more difficult in terms of engaging the rest of your business and staff volunteers and so on. But where possible, using those diverse speakers to across gender, ethnicity, different routes into work, seniority, apprentices, sharing, and the key to the representation is that there's real stories. I'll just give you a very quick example. I did something a couple of years ago, and it really crystallized my thoughts on this. We brought in to a school in Tower Hamlets, year 9 boys as part of their maths curriculum. I was thinking, oh, well, this is a nice hospital pass for us because this is going to be a tough one. But we actually got a load of financial traders from the city, about 13, 14 of them. And we had no fluff. That was the rule. Absolutely no fluff. We're just going to go in, carousel, 20-minute drop-in sessions, talk about your journey, make it personal, talk about your career to now, and make it quite conversational. No presentations, nothing like it. It was just a really impactful session because it was based in story. And I think that all of us as humans like story. We can empathize better when there's a story in front of us rather than a list of facts and figures, perhaps. And just the power of that was transformational for some of those learners. Some of those learners never thought that there would be a route for them, and some of the inclusive messages that were being brought through there around. I remember there was one in particular talking about his struggle with really quite profound dyslexia, and just the way that his organization was supporting to the point that he didn't feel different. And the reasonable adjustments were such that he was just able to perform his job just as anybody else could. And that was really powerful. Like, we saw in the feedback from the learners in the room who previously, and one of the quotes was, "I never thought there'd be a place for me there." And that was really, really powerful. Clarity is important. So explaining the purpose of the activity. And again, these are just good practice things for everybody, right? So if I'm being asked to do something, I kind of want to know why you're asking me to do it. But being able to see what good might look like, what I'm aiming for, clear step-by-step instructions, and a simple structure to follow. That doesn't mean we can't build in complexity, but that needs to be a scaffolded approach. And again, the educators will be your partners in this. So some of the partnerships we've brokered between employers and some of our SEND institutions have really grown over the years. And there's a really kind of good working relationship there where it's kind of testing and learning and seeing how we go. And the last but certainly not least, is around psychological safety. So do those learners know you? Probably not. A lot of our employer engagement is quite transient. It can be quite ad hoc in the life of a learner. Even if there's repeat engagement over the years, it can still feel quite ad hoc. So starting with the warm-up, starting with a friendly, low pressure activity, encouraging creativity, encouraging trying stuff, not having sort of punishing feedback in there, normalizing those mistakes as part of the learning is really important. So just a delivery style there that encourages learners to bring their full selves to the activity. So that's all a little bit abstract. I want to bring in some practical tips here. So Included is one of the partners of the Careers and Enterprise Company, and these resources are all available totally for free on the Careers and Enterprise Company's resource directory, and I'd really encourage everybody to be aware of that because there's some brilliant resources on there. This is taken from a wider set of activities, but you can see here how the learning outcome blends through the objective, how employers can support, and then some of those example activities. So I'm just going to pick one and walk through it. So the improving self-awareness, and this is in the introduce and inspire phase. So if I just quickly zip back so you can see where I am, just those early years really in secondary school. So improving self-awareness, that middle one, exploring interests, skills, and ideal work environments. That's what we're aiming for as a collective group, the school, the employer, and the learners. So we might be delivering some really short job tasters there, or some really mini workplace simulations that could literally be as simple as folding boxes, greeting a visitor, answering the phone, whatever that might look like. Being able to describe what makes a really great team member in your workplace, really focusing in on those essential skills around behavior and attitude, not just on those qualifications. Sharing how different roles suit different people. So being able to show how maybe somebody working in the data analytics department would really value a quiet working space, whereas somebody working on the front desk needs would really values talking to customers and so on. So how could this look in practice? Well, a really simple station rotation, so really simple workplace tasks, and they go around the room and try things. But then they're asked to reflect on which of those really appealed to you. What was your ideal job from those that you tried there? And talk about how what their strengths could be aligned into the business. So what you see here is some really visual, hands-on activity learning opportunity, really low pressure way to interact and stay engaged, and a supportive environment to explore things that inherently they might not like as much as others, without that fear of failure in there. Now, as we move into this second phase, we're starting to look in a bit more depth at some of the roles and responsibilities. So this is looking at maybe the structure of the business. So maybe starting to bring in job titles, different tools that they use, maybe different systems, maybe starting to talk about different routes into work, such as supported internships or on the job training. You might then go on to demonstrate a job role speed chat, or maybe present a short video and so on. So this is all quite visual, all quite engaging stuff. And what you'll see at the end of this one in the example activity, just in this middle section here, is a particular project. So what is a job title? A poster project. Now that doesn't need to necessarily be done with you there. It could be something that they then take away and do back in the school setting. And then you might go in and give some feedback on that, for example. So that is a really effective wraparound activity there that moves us from that introduce and inspire phase into really getting into that investigative exploratory phase. And finally, around apply and demonstrate. So supportive and scaffolded environments are absolutely key to help them build their confidence through either the real or simulated work experience. And really what we're looking for here is a reflection, progression, preparing for that real world. But again, we're still keeping with those four themes of accessibility and so on. So looking at the experience of recruitment here, we might run a send-friendly mock interview session. So that's keeping it short, keeping it very supportive, maybe helping complete a simple job application at the start, maybe beginning with sharing what you're looking for in a candidate using really clear examples, and providing really, really clear feedback afterwards. And this might be linked into some personal introspection development, so helping learners identify their own skills and their own strengths and how they could bring that out in their conversation with you. So those are just some practical ways. I've got some case studies here. I will make sure you've got a link to the Included whole package of resources, because there's some really great ideas in there. And I think the thing that I would just encourage you to recognize is that actually there are really different sort of levels of additional need, and I think that's reflected in the policy direction. And those are just some examples for a particular set of students, perhaps. But actually, what's really important is engaging with the institution to really understand what are those needs, and how do those adaptations need to be made, because this might be perfect for one group of learners with additional needs, but this is not a homogenous group. It might be actually a little bit patronizing for another group of learners with additional needs who might be saying, well, this is too easy, I can fly through this. So it really does need that differentiation approach taken to it. And what will help to look at this is the employer standards framework, in particular standard 2. I'm going to show you what goes into standard 2, which is be inclusive. Here, this is a self-assessment that anybody can do for free through the CEC's website. So we're looking here, and they kind of map to our principles, but identifying the areas of need. So looking at where the most need has been identified in your areas, and the Careers Hub can certainly support with that in terms of which institutions have had employer engagement for learners with SEND or not. Breaking down barriers. So again, looking at some of those things that we were just talking about there, that relatability, so that psychological safety, and that might be repeat engagement with a set of learners, shorter, sharper activities over a period of time, as we're about to explore. Actively challenging the stereotypes and preconceptions, and being adaptive and accommodating to those requests. So this is just a couple of examples that we've seen here at the Careers Hub that we've had a hand in supporting with. So this was a particular work experience activity delivered through one of our cornerstone employers, Sculpt. And this was delivered over 4 distinct sessions with very, very clear learning objectives and outcomes. So all of the sort of scaffolding that you see here, from beginning with understanding what mental health and well-being is, and that was really the lens that they did this work experience through, which is quite different to a traditional work experience placement, a quite interesting lens on it. But actually, through exploring those themes, they were able to bring in themes around problem solving and teamwork skills, project management, and so on, and prioritization. They talked about storytelling and public speaking, and by the end of the 4 weeks, and these were distinct sessions through those 4 weeks, this is some of the feedback we had from the coordinator from our side who was involved in the project. So evidently seeing students become more confident, asking more questions, completing role play activities. So that, I think, is testament to the value of repeated engagement over time, the building of trust and familiarity, to really allow learners who may be low on confidence because they've not had this kind of engagement with anybody other than their teachers in the past, because we do have those cold spots. That investment can really go a long way. This is another one. This is a specific workplace activity. This we did alongside the Canal River Trust with one of our pupil referral units, our PRUs, looking in particular at STEM learning. So looking at women in STEM and showcasing those roles within the trust itself. So there were more kind of objectives packed into this one, but this was using the local area. So this is another thing. It doesn't all need to be based in an office, in the school environment, in a classroom. You can be quite creative with it. And I think that the schools and colleges that we work with really value those employers that are able to take a bit of time early on to just think about, well, how could we make this really fun and exciting? And this was a brilliant one, and we were able to get some brilliant feedback from it from the learners as well. It was really about raising aspirations and challenging disadvantage through that real world learning. Now, I'm almost at the point of wrapping up here. Happy to take any contributions or questions when I do. But before I go, as with the others, so apologies if this is the 3rd time you're hearing this pitch for the Equalex Employer Charter. This is our standard vehicle now for employers who are seeking to engage in this space. We are able to consult with you as employers on this. And if this is something you want to explore with your own education outreach programs, please do get in touch with us. We'll take all the time we need. Everything we do is completely free, and we will make sure that you and your colleagues are feeling suitably prepared before being introduced to any institutions. These are just some of the organisations involved in the Charter already. And what you'll see as part of the commitment is there is a commitment there to supporting diverse and inclusive hiring practices. Now, everything we do is aligned to both the Mayor's Good Work Standard So we'll support work towards that, and we've mapped into exactly where you can use that in that application, but also the disability confident framework also. Now, if there's anything we can do as for you as a chartered employer to support with your colleagues, we can deliver bespoke training packages, we can come and speak to your colleagues about any of this and so on, as well as brokering those relationships with the institutions themselves. So the final thing I'll point to is just our recent report that came out through Reading Partnership, which is directly looking at how we make those transitions into workplace stronger, and some recommendations there to do that. And I think a big part of that is ensuring that those early interventions are inclusive and are engaging and are meeting the needs of learners wherever they are. Okay, that is all of the content for today. I hope that was useful for you. I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this stage. Okay, I'll take that as either very good or very bad, but that's fine. The recording of this session will be going on to YouTube probably at the end of this week, maybe early next week, depending on how we get on with National Careers Week. We have a question that's popped up.
Hi there, hiya.
Hi.
So you know how you said about the bespoke packages. So what I do is I have an agency where we try and eradicate and remove barriers for deaf and disabled people. So
Okay.
with your so we're kind of a specialist for the deaf community. So
Yeah.
with your training packages, is there something in there for deaf people or?
Well, we'd love to talk to you about that. Yeah,
Okay.
let's take that conversation offline. We're always looking for new ways to do that. We do have some sort of generalist stuff here at the hub, but that specificity, we're always looking for partners who have that expertise.
Okay.
We do work with a number of schools who are specifically for learners with hearing impairment. So yeah, let's pick that conversation up and see where we can collaborate there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Brilliant. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And our last session is tomorrow. It's looking at an in-depth practical guide to modern work experience and how employers can really take hold of the opportunities that are coming in terms of the flexibility of the new models. So thanks very much, and hope to see you soon.